Ever catch yourself daydreaming, but not about, winning the lottery or anything fun? More like about your own death.
Hmm.
It sounds dark, I know. But for people dealing with, like, the after effects of really intense ongoing trauma, what experts call complex PTSD, these death fantasies, they can be surprisingly common, and
Yeah.
they're way more nuanced than just wanting to disappear.
Exactly. It's less about a desire to actually die
Mm-hmm.
and more about this like desperate yearning for relief from just profound emotional pain. See, complex PTSD, it kind of embeds itself deep within a person. It's not like a single scary event you can just kind of compartmentalize. It becomes the lens through which they see themselves in the world.
So these death fantasies, they're not about, like, actually planning an exit strategy, right? It's more symbolic.
Uh,
A cry from the depths of their experience.
Precisely. Imagine feeling trapped in this never-ending cycle of pain and fear with no escape. Death fantasies, they offer this sense of control. In a reality where control has been like brutally stripped away, it's about agency. Being able to write your own ending, even if it's only in your mind.
So it's less about wanting to die and more about, like, silencing the pain, taking back some semblance of power in a world that's felt incredibly unsafe.
Absolutely. And that need for control, it often manifests in kind of fascinating ways. We see it in what's called death rehearsal, where a person will meticulously plan their death in their mind.
Whoa, hold on. That sounds incredibly intense. What's the function of that level of detail?
It's about facing down a terrifying unknown
Hmm.
and trying to like impose order onto it.
Mm.
Imagine like taking something that's been used as a weapon against you, death in this case,
Mhm.
and turning it into something you can at least mentally control.
It's like they're reclaiming the narrative of their own ending, in a way, trying to find a sense of agency in the face of, like, this overwhelming powerlessness, but it's still a fantasy, right?
Yeah.
Not an actual desire to die by suicide.
Right. It's a coping mechanism,
Yeah.
albeit a distressing one.
Yeah.
And this need for control, it often gets like tangled up with another hallmark of complex PTSD,
Mm.
emotional flashbacks. Imagine suddenly being right back in the thick of the trauma. All those
Sure.
feelings raw and terrifying.
And in those moments, rational thought goes out the window. It makes sense that death fantasies might feel like the only way out, a way to escape the unbearable intensity of those flashbacks.
Exactly. Especially for individuals who haven't had the chance to develop like healthy coping mechanisms due to their trauma. Death fantasies become a way to regulate those overwhelming emotions,
Mhm.
even if it's only happening in their minds. And this is where we often see the heartbreaking presence of toxic shame.
You're right. It's like there's this extra layer of self-inflicted pain in these fantasies.
Exactly. Toxic shame tells you that you are like fundamentally flawed,
Right.
that you're somehow deserving of the pain. It becomes a breeding ground for that relentless inner critic that many survivors talk about.
Yeah.
This voice that's constantly whispering that you're not good enough,
Hmm.
that you'll never be good enough,
Yeah.
and maybe you'd be better off dead.
It's like death becomes the ultimate punishment, a way to satisfy that inner critic's judgment,
Yeah.
and finally find some like twisted sense of relief.
It's a tragic attempt to kind of silence that self-attack,
Yeah.
to escape the constant barrage of self-blame and worthlessness that toxic shame just perpetuates. But
Hmm.
there's another layer to these death fantasies that we haven't really touched on yet, the relational aspect.
That's interesting. So it's not just an internal struggle. Tell me more about that.
Well, individuals with complex PTSD, they often carry these deep-seated attachment wounds. They long for validation,
Yeah.
for someone to truly see and acknowledge the pain they've endured. Their death fantasies, in a
Mhm.
way, become this subconscious cry for help, a desperate hope that someone will recognize their suffering and offer the support they so desperately crave.
So it's like they're saying, if I'm gone, maybe then you'll finally see how much I was hurting. That's heartbreaking.
It really is. It speaks to the profound loneliness and isolation that
Mhm.
often accompany complex PTSD. Imagine feeling like your pain is invisible, like like you have to resort to imagining your own death just to be seen and heard. It's the powerful reminder of how essential empathy and understanding are in supporting survivors.
Absolutely. It's not enough to just address the symptoms.
Yeah.
We have to address the underlying emotional wounds and unmet needs that drive those symptoms. Before we delve further into treatment approaches, I think it would be helpful to take a step back and recap what we've learned so far about the function of death fantasies and complex PTSD.
That's a great idea. We've seen how they can be a form of escapism from unbearable emotional pain. a way to regain a sense of control in a world where control has been lost,
Right.
a distorted coping mechanism for intense emotional flashbacks, and even a tragic attempt to silence a relentless inner critic fueled by toxic shame.
Yeah.
And as we just discussed, they can also be this hidden plea for connection and validation.
It's a stark reminder that behind these seemingly dark fantasies is a profound longing for relief,
Yeah.
for agency, and for genuine human connection.
And understanding that is the first step to offering compassion and support.
It's like we're learning a whole new language,
Yeah.
the language of trauma, where things aren't always as they appear on the surface. And like you said, understanding that language, it's key to providing true support.
Exactly. It's about like shifting our perspective from why would someone think this way?
Yeah.
What is this thought trying to tell us? What need is it trying to express?
So for someone listening who might be struggling with these death fantasies, what's the takeaway? Where do they go from here?
Well, first and foremost, there is hope and there is help available. Complex PTSD is treatable, and these death fantasies, while incredibly distressing, they're not a life sentence.
Yeah.
The key is to reach out for specialized support,
Yeah.
particularly from a therapist specializing in trauma.
That makes sense. But trauma therapy can feel like such a big scary word to many. What can someone expect when they take that step?
It's about finding a safe haven, a space where they feel heard, validated, and understood without judgment. A good therapist will help them process the trauma, develop healthier coping mechanisms to manage those intense emotions, and start to kind of untangle those deeply ingrained beliefs rooted in shame.
It's like they're slowly dismantling that internal world of self-criticism and
Mm.
replacing it with a more compassionate and self-accepting one, brick by brick.
Exactly. And as we talked about earlier,
Right.
addressing those attachment wounds and nurturing healthier relationships is also crucial. Group therapy, for example, can be incredibly powerful. It allows individuals to connect with others who truly understand their experience,
Mhm.
to challenge those ingrained beliefs about being unworthy of love and belonging,
Yeah.
and realize they're not alone.
It sounds like a journey of rediscovering one's inherent worth,
Yeah.
their resilience, their capacity for connection, all things that trauma tries to steal away.
It's a journey of reclaiming your story,
Yeah.
you know. Recovery. It isn't about erasing the past. It's about integrating it into a new narrative,
Yeah.
one where those death fantasies no longer hold power.
Reclaiming your story. I love that. And as we wrap up this deep dive, it makes me think about how we can create a world where those struggling with the invisible wounds of trauma, they feel safe enough to reach out for support. A world where their cries for help, even those whispered in the language of death fantasies, are met with understanding and compassion, not stigma. Something to think about as we move forward with this newfound knowledge. Until next time.